We are at the dawn of a new decade, the 1930s, as we continue our journey from local to global here in TEW IX. The Effganic Genesis mod continues to bring new surprises into the fold, serving both as a benefit and a challenge to our journey of wrestling superiority. It's once again time for the biggest heavyweight tournament in the world, and this year's iteration is sure to impress. You don't want to miss this one. Welcome back everyone here to the WHAM as we continue our local to global journey, and we have stepped foot into the 1930s for the very first time in this series. And as the previous year just wrapped up, we've got some annual awards to check out, see who shined in the world of wrestling in the year of 1929, and give us a good idea of who are going to be some big names to look out for as we go into the 1930s. And to no surprise, for the 9th year in a row, Daniel Loisel wins Male Wrestler of the Year, and that man has just been on top of the wrestling world ever since this database began. He's getting up there in age, he's now 39 years old, but his skills and his popularity are both exceptional and really unrivaled by anyone, to the exception of one man, who is Sir Anthony Henry. Kuni Hashiguchi became the first woman to win the Female Wrestler of the Year. She does serve as our road agent, but she competes in the ring in CWB and then JJC, which is the all-female wrestling company over in Japan. And in fact, she owns that company. So her progression, she's going to be a big player in females wrestling. She is 80 pounds of fury. Male Tag Team of the Year, no winner this year, but we might see our Wellington boys take that spot here for next year. No Female Tag Team of the Year, of course. And the Male Young Wrestler of the Year is Masked Porcupine, the 22-year-old from Viva La Lucha. He's got some really good stats. Technical and aerial are elite comparatively to the rest of the pool, and the man really doesn't have a lot of weaknesses outside of his hardcore style and his lack of experience. And just in his most recent match, he had an in-ring performance of 50, and that far surpassed anyone else he was in the ring with. Veronica Lutter wins Female Young Wrestler of the Year, the daughter of Jay Lutter, who is the road agent for SPW. Male Veteran Wrestler of the Year is our own Friedrich Herzog. He's also the owner of POG, so he's a full-time worker there, but he is our heavyweight champion, and Friedrich Herzog has been putting in some work this year, that's for sure. Anthony Henry is the Male Independent Wrestler of the Year, and he's also the second best wrestler in the world, ranked number 2, and this is the only man who can really hold a candle to Daniel Loisel right now, and SPW's got them both. However, Anthony Henry also works for UKC, helping out that show as well, but you can see 41 popularity in the Southeast is great. Paige Gagne is the Female Independent Wrestler of the Year. Insanely exceptional fundamental and physical attributes, and women's wrestling is going to really evolve in this decade from those that I've heard that have played a little bit further into this database. So you're going to make sure you want to stick around to see how that affects the WHAM. Company of the Year is SPW for the 9th year in the row, and Most Improved Company of the Year goes to Viva La Lucha the second time they won the honor. Match of the Year will be Daniel Loisel defeating Sir Anthony Henry with a match rating of 69. Very nice. SPW Insanity Plea was the Match Card of the Year, and that card held the Match of the Year, so that would make sense. Male Manager of the Year is our own Angus Wellington. Female Manager of the Year, Gabriela Suarez. Tajo Covarrubias wins the play-by-play commentator once again. Jairo Haran wins color commentator, and now there's a little bit more competition for the broadcaster awards as well, so that'll be interesting to see too. And Kenny Wiles takes home Male Referee of the Year. And that is no surprise there, as he is the cream of the crop of referees, but he's also someone who's on our roster, so we love to see it. And we can also take a look at the WHAM exclusive awards for the year, and Joel Cartwright would be the one to take home Wrestler of the Year. No surprise there, as that man has been putting in work. And we actually have no Male Young Wrestler of the Year, so we're going to have to take a look at our roster, find some young gems, some young prospects to get going. Match of the Year, that junior heavyweight 5-man elimination match, rating of 55, so we're not too far behind the top company. We are a bit behind, but not an insurmountable amount. Match Card of the Year, the Amazing Grappling Spectacle 54 with a card rating of 50. That was our first and only card to receive a rating of 50 so far. Angus Wellington, of course, the Male Manager of the Year. Gabriela Suarez, the Female Manager of the Year. And Riker Zucker wins the Color Commentator of the Year, while Kenny Wiles takes home the Male Referee of the Year for the WHAM. And with the awards out of the way, we can move forward. We see that we've got a few contract negotiations. Joel Cartwright and Diego Berrigan have agreed to extend their contracts, and we are bringing in Masked Hammer for the Derby. We've got him on 2 appearances here on this contract, and we're bringing him in from Central Mexico, and he's got a bully personality. But I think it might be worth it, as he is exceptional in technical and puro rezo abilities. He's got really good fundamental and physical stats, but his consistency is rather low. He may be hit or miss, but it's something that we got to try. He's 227. He is in fact a heavyweight, so we're bringing him in from Mexico to take a part of this Derby tournament, as we do like to bring in some fresh faces each year that we hold this event. And we're also renewing the contract with Sebastian Morales to bring back last year's Derby winner, and he is going to get an entry position to try to make it 2 in a row. But with all the administration work out of the way, we're now ready to begin the next event, the amazing Grappling Spectacle 59, but more importantly, the kickoff show to the 5th edition of the Derby, the biggest heavyweight wrestling tournament in the 1920s and now the 1930s. We brought on a few new faces, but there are 4 big matches that are in store, and we're going to do a quick rundown of those before we get started. Friedrich Herzog, the heavyweight champion, defending his championship and kicking off against former henchman and bodyguard JP Cromwell. So JP Cromwell will have the opportunity to not only get some revenge on Friedrich Herzog, but also capture the heavyweight championship en route to winning the Derby. We've also got Bronson Fraley, who will be going one-on-one with Woodrow Gunter in the first round, and this is a big match between 2 big names in the wrestling industry, and of course Bronson Fraley has got the backing of the Wellington dynasty behind him, so we'll see how that dynamic shapes this match. And Neil Allman will be going one-on-one with Brian Hatcher, the former heavyweight champion Neil Allman, looking to once again win the Derby for the 2nd time. And Brian Hatcher, we haven't seen him in a while, but he will be standing in Neil Allman's way in the first round. And the final match that we're going over here, but will actually be the first match of the night, Sebastian Morales and Masked Hammer, 2 former members of Viva La Lucha. Well, Sebastian Morales is actually a current member of Viva La Lucha, but Hammer has now come to the Wham on a few appearances, and we're going to see how he does. And like I said, this match is actually going to get us started, and it gets us going with a segment rating of 39. Sebastian Morales with an in-ring performance of 47, Hammer at 28, and we would see Masked Hammer debut his gimmick, and it got a rating of great, while Morales, for whatever reason, he gets a poor rating on his gimmick, but he still delivers good in-match ratings and performances. But we get off to a good start, but of course Hammer's got some rust that he's got to shake off, so we're going to see exactly what kind of matches he can put in later on down the line once he's well and attuned back into the ring. We would see Sebastian Morales pick up the victory and move on in the tournament, as he has got the opportunity to once again win the tournament, as well as he is the man who won last year's tournament and became heavyweight champion, in a big shock, as he was exclusively the man from Viva La Lucha. Moving on into the next segment, we would actually see Riker Zucker interrupting the post-match celebration of Sebastian Morales to announce that Brian Hatcher has been found unconscious backstage and will be unable to compete this evening in the Derby. Riker Zucker would then go on to explain that a replacement opponent will be determined, and the match will still take place, leaving Neil Allman to wonder who took out his opponent. And Riker Zucker, he's got okay performance abilities when making announcements on the microphone, but he just gets a segment rating of 32. But it does bring a massive change to the tournament, and we're just going to have to find out who is going to take the spot of Brian Hatcher, because our next match is Bronson Fraley and Woodrow Gunter, and we've got Fraley going over on Woodrow Gunter thanks to the interference from Chuck Wellington and the Wellington Dynasty boys. Angus Wellington, of course, would be in a managerial position here, and Duke Wellington would even be in attendance as well. But a competitive match until the Wellington boys got involved, and we would see Bronson Fraley with an in-ring performance of 41, Woodrow Gunter at 43, but all in all, Bronson Fraley with the opportunity to win the Derby for a 3rd time and become a heavyweight champion in the process, and he's got good chances with the Wellington boys behind him. Segment rating of 39 here, and we are continuing to move on. We've got 2 tournaments going on in this episode. Of course, we've got the Derby, but we've also got that Tag Team Contendership Tournament, and it will conclude here with our final match of Diego Bergen and Dean Grunge going up against Joel Cartwright and Albie Dewberry. And in another instance of Albie Dewberry and Joel Cartwright with the far superior in-ring performances, their opposition actually picks up the victory as Diego Bergen and Dean Grunge come away with the surprise victory after there's a little bit of miscommunication between Joel Cartwright and Albie Dewberry. There was an accident near the ropes, and Diego Bergen and Dean Grunge took advantage with a quick roll-up, and this would stun the two junior heavyweights, but it will allow Diego Bergen and Dean Grunge to get a shot at the tag team championships against the Wellington Boys. So Dean Grunge in-ring performance of 37, Diego Bergen at 36, Albie Dewberry at 46, and Joel Cartwright at 50. Altogether, that gives us a segment rating of 41 for this match, and the crowd's at white hot. So not only do we make some progress with the Derby, but we also crown a contender for the tag team championships. And then in our next match, Friedrich Herzog defending the heavyweight championship against JP Cromwell. And you can see here, Friedrich Herzog is no longer sporting the colors of Lights Camera Action, and rather the new colors of a new stable called The Pride, and we'll get more into that a little later on into the episode. But all in all, we see JP Cromwell come up short in his attempt to take the heavyweight championship and get some revenge against Friedrich Herzog. Of course, we've got Fritz Hattendorf at ringside, assisting and aiding Friedrich Herzog, but he is a big, strong man that doesn't need a whole lot of assistance in the first place, as he is a very formidable champion. But Herzog with an in-ring performance of 49, Cromwell at 27, and we get a segment rating of 35, and that segment rating of 35 is the main reason our heavyweight championship match is not the main event, because I knew it would not give us a main event rating, so we're after a little bit better numbers than 35. And fortunately we get them, as our next match gets a rating of 43, and we would find that Elijah Mays would take the spot of Brian Hatcher in the Derby to face Neil Allman. Now this is a match that has been in the making for quite a while, ever since Elijah Mays took Neil Allman out with that choke, and Elijah Mays ever since then has just been dead set on getting into contention of the heavyweight championship despite being a junior heavyweight, and he seemed to have taken matters into his own hands here by taking out Brian Hatcher, taking his spot in the tournament, and he actually picked up a victory clean over Neil Allman, once again applying that guillotine choke, and Neil Allman would have to tap out to the guillotine choke in a huge upset victory for Elijah Mays, pulling it off against a much larger opponent and apparently moving on in the Derby tournament. Elijah Mays with an in-ring performance of 46, Neil Allman at 47, and this is the kind of performance that we needed to see for the main event. But we do have a segment to follow, and you could see that Elijah Mays standing before a crowd that is in utter shock, as they cannot believe Elijah Mays took Neil Allman down clean. Mays would then offer his hand in a sign of respect to the former heavyweight champion, and Neil Allman was in disbelief himself that he came up short against the junior heavyweight. But Elijah Mays clearly proved his might and capabilities, and Neil Allman would in fact shake his hand and return the respect. Allman would leave the ring, frustrated but quiet, and Elijah Mays would celebrate his victory as he moved one step closer of defying the odds and competing for the heavyweight championship as a junior heavyweight. And we get a segment rating of 49 to end the show, and of course Neil Allman with his great performance abilities is the star in this segment, despite Elijah Mays being the focus. So that ends our show with an overall rating of 42, not bad work for the first round of the Derby, and of course now that there are less matches to do in each round, we will see more of the junior heavyweights come out, which of course helps the show ratings as well. And we're going to compliment Dean Grunge and Diego Bergen on moving on and gaining contention for the tag team championships, and they seemed pleased. And Benson Sandy and RT Lincoln have both officially left the company. We didn't have any space for him in that last match card to get him on any kind of final matches, so unfortunately Benson Sandy's big storyline that we were getting him into ends rather anticlimactically with no kind of resolution. Fortunately, it didn't get too deep into it, but it is disappointing to see the boy go. And I did notice something when scouting out SPW a little bit. When looking at their product, they're currently at Competitive Entertainment right now, and this product is currently on trend in basically the entire world, which means bonuses will be provided for running shows in those areas. And as of right now, our No Style product is extremely similar to the competitive entertainment, and it would only take 3 months to change over. So I'm going to make the change. It's very similar to what we're running already, but it will give us that bonus of the popularity gain. So we're biting the tactics of SPW a little bit, but we are at enough disadvantages that we don't need to give ourselves any more or just actively not help ourselves if we can. So we're going to go ahead and make the change here, and we will see the change finish up in 90 days. And as of January 11th, there is a new wrestling company in the world, Victory Wrestling Group, a women's wrestling company, and they are based out of Southern England. And we'll have to see how this develops, but it will be interesting. And now there are 2 female exclusive companies in the world, with the second one being Joshi Japan Championship, owned by our very own Kuni Hashiguchi. And this is a big development as Sebastian Morales and Gabriela Suarez have now begun dating. And Sebastian Morales is of course in Viva La Lucha, Emilio Suarez owns Viva La Lucha, and Gabriela Suarez is the sister / manager of Emilio. So not only does it mean that these two will have a positive influence to the backstage morale, but it also means that if Sebastian Morales goes back to Viva La Lucha and I don't keep him around, there's a good chance that Gabriela Suarez gets rather upset with me. So we've gotten ourselves into a little bit of a situation here, and it was not intentional, but we're going to take advantage of the little bit of boost that it provides to the locker room morale. And you know, Sebastian Morales is a phenomenal superstar, but I really did not have any kind of intentions of having a worker full-time going from my company to another company in a different country or something like that. I know it happens outside in the rest of the world right now, despite it not being a thing that would probably happen in the 1930s or 20s at all. But that bit of realism has escaped us in all likelihood. Still something I think about, so chime down below in the comments if you think we should keep Sebastian Morales on the roster full-time, despite more than likely having to pay for his travel, because I don't think he's going to move over to the Mid-South while still being employed by Viva La Lucha. However, we've got nothing standing in our way of the next event, the Amazing Grappling Spectacle 60, the 60th edition of our monthly wrestling show here in the Mid-South, and after about the first year, we haven't missed a month in Oklahoma City since, and we are now in front of 149 people. What a roaring crowd, and we've got a 4-man match to kick off our show. The losers of the first round of the Derby, Neil Allman, JP Cromwell, Masked Hammer, and Woodrow Gunter, all competing in this free-for-all, this chaotic match, and we would see a segment rating of 39 to get our show started. Woodrow Gunter would actually be the one to come out on top after pinning JP Cromwell. It seems that Masked Hammer has knocked the rust off, but he was held back by the chaotic nature of the match, and he only got an in-ring performance of 39, JP Cromwell at 30, Woodrow Gunter at 47, and Neil Allman, of course, our man, at 53. So this match specifically doesn't have a ton of stipulations or a whole lot of weight to it, but we would see Woodrow Gunter pick up a victory and get some momentum. We would see Masked Hammer show what he can do, and he got a nice 39 in-ring performance. That is not bad work for his second match here in the WHAM. We got some clarity that maybe JP Cromwell won't be sticking around for a whole lot of time if he's not a part of a faction, and he's only getting in-ring performances of 30, and we also know that Neil Allman is that man. And another bonus that I'm seeing here is the chaos of the match helped hide how badly JP Cromwell was performing, so he was able to play into the facade that he could hang with these kind of competitors. But we will move on into our next match, the first match of the second round of the Derby, and we would get Bronson Fraley going up against Elijah Mays. And while we did not get a segment or an angle to confirm it, Brian Hatcher is in fact injured and still unable to compete, thus solidifying Elijah Mays' spot here in the Derby tournament. And there's a lot to unpack with this one. First of all, let's go over the numbers. Segment rating of 39, Bronson Fraley in-ring performance of 42, Elijah Mays at 48, and Elijah Mays would be the one to defeat Bronson Fraley following a botched interference by Angus Wellington. He would pull off a quick roll-up. All he needed was 3 seconds to secure the victory over Bronson Fraley and move himself into the finals of the Derby. However, it wasn't just a botched interference from Angus Wellington, but the entire electrical system of the venue would go out for the moment. It was dark, there was no visibility, and Elijah Mays was able to keep composure, and once the lights came back on, was savvy enough to duck out of the way of an attempted strike from Angus Wellington. Angus Wellington would strike Bronson Fraley, which wouldn't so much hurt him, but more surprise him, maybe confuse him a little bit. But all in all, Elijah Mays would capitalize and secure another massive victory over a former heavyweight champion as he continues his path, this improbable path of a junior heavyweight competing in the heavyweight tournament. And in this next segment, the Wellington brothers and Bronson Fraley are absolutely distraught after a failure with the electrical system led to a backfired interference. I don't know what I was doing when trying to spell electrical, but I'd failed there, resulting in Elijah Mays taking advantage and securing a massive upset victory. As Elijah Mays made his way out of the ring area, the entirety of the Wellington dynasty were animated in the expression of their agony and disbelief. Just a segment rating of 25 here, not the best acting done by our Wellington boys here, but you get the point across that they cannot believe what just happened. And moving on into our next match, we would have Christopher Hartwell challenging Emilio Suarez for the Junior Heavyweight Championship. If you remember in the last episode, Christopher Hartwell was actually able to crown himself #1 contender for the Junior Heavyweight Championship. And there was not a ton of shenanigans here, we just got a good match from our Junior Heavyweights, but Gabriela Suarez of course would play her part as manager and distract Christopher Hartwell, and during the match, there would actually be a near miss from Emilio Suarez where he almost struck Gabriela, but Gabriela would in fact dodge it, get out of the way, and stay out of harm. But all in all, Christopher Hartwell in-ring performance of 32, Emilio Suarez way up there at a 50, and not bad work from the first of 2 championship matches this evening with a segment rating of 44. However, despite the victory, Emilio and Gabriela are at odds with one another after a strike nearly missed taking Gabriela out near the end of the contest. Emilio would flaunt his championship, but Gabriela would protest his cockiness, showing tension between the siblings. Just a little bit of dissolution being hinted at between Emilio and Gabriela already. I know we don't get a ton of shows through, but a lot of time does in fact pass in this save, as we've already gone about 5 years into this entire database. But we get a segment rating of 41, and that will end our bit with the Suarez siblings. Moving on into our next match, the Derby continues with another heavyweight championship match. And not without the interference of Fritz Hattendorf, Friedrich Herzog would come away with another victory here in his Derby mission, putting Sebastian Morales down and securing the pinfall victory. And unfortunately, Friedrich Herzog cannot go longer than 6 minutes in the ring, but he's still able to get some really good performances in, as he is a bit of a spectacle himself, being the strongest man on the face of planet Earth. But of course, we know what Sebastian Morales can do in the ring. In-ring performance of 41, and all in all, we get a match rating of 48, so great work here, and you can see that Friedrich Herzog and Fritz Hattendorf are a good pairing, and we get a nice little bonus for their work together, and you love to see that. So all in all, overall show rating of 45, and we do see our popularity continue to increase. Whether we hit the next point is yet to be seen, but Herzog with another successful defense of his heavyweight championship, Emilio Suarez another successful defense of his junior heavyweight championship, and then of course Elijah Mays with a massive upset victory over Bronson Fraley to advance in the tournament. So things are really starting to shape up here for the spectacle of amazing grapples, as the final of the Derby will be seen. And we're going to praise Elijah Mays and Woodrow Gunter. We gained $600 from this show, and we're really starting to see some nice turnover for our efforts here. We do not move up to that next point of popularity. We still are at 25, but that's going to do it for our show here. And after their final appearances, our boys from Mexico, Masked Hammer and Sebastian Morales, are now gone from the WAM. And I'm really on the fence of what I want to do here, so we might give them a few more appearances and make a determination later on down the line. And I will take this moment to point out that January 1930 was in fact our very first month seeing some profit as a company, so big steps taken there. I'm also going to make a change to our booking team. We're going to bring in Elijah Mays, who's got a booking skill of 95. So hopefully we see a little bit of a better return on our creative energy going forward. And I am back in contract negotiations with Sebastian Morales, and given his new relationship status, Gabriela Suarez is just absolutely ecstatic to see me in those contract negotiations, so that will provide another lift to the morale, whether it's for the entire locker room or just Gabriela Suarez. But either way, we're going to bring him in we're just going to make it an ongoing contract, and we'll end it whenever we need to. We've come across an interesting headline here, as we can see that Queensland Wrestling, Victor Garza's company, is only weeks away from closing due to financial problems. They are over $12,000 in debt, and they are not going to be able to relieve that. We've already bailed them out once, so this will be the end of Queensland Wrestling for Victor Garza, and we're going to see just what happens to him afterwards. We'll go ahead and just put him on our short list so we can keep an eye on him. But there are a few names on his roster that might be worth looking at and seeing if we could get them to relocate over to the United States, like Mackenzie Dane, who has got insane performance stats, 94 charisma, 97 acting, but also Mark Howard as well. If we could get him in America, that would be a big one. And after simulating a few weeks, we see some big notifications. Elijah Mays' contract's ending, Emilio Suarez contract is ending, but most importantly, SPW wants to get into a bidding war with our boy Craig Bean, and we're not going to let that happen. So we are going to send our man Craig Bean an exclusive handshake deal for 2 years. We're going to keep it at $20 a show, and we're going to see how he feels about that, and hopefully he becomes exclusive to us and tells SPW to kick rocks, because that would be ideal, because of course if SPW signs him, we'd have to let him go. And we are of course going to send new contract offers to our man Emilio Suarez and Elijah Mays as well. And I am happy to report that Craig Bean does accept the exclusive offer. And I think I found the reason why SPW went after Craig Bean in the first place, and we see that Turner Spittler, an SPW mainstay, is no longer with the company. I just saw here that he left SPW February 13th, so just 2 weeks ago in game time. So we are definitely going to send this man a contract offer of 2 years and see, maybe just 1 year, and we might go exclusive after that. And we'll see what he thinks about that. And Turner Spittler is officially a member of the Wham. That is a big signing. I wasn't anticipating bringing him on. He does have a selfish personality, but he's got some really good fundamental and physical skills, great psychology, really good experience, and of course established popularity, though only 18 in the Mid-South. And this is a guy who's a former SPW heavyweight champion, former SPW Southeastern champion, tag team champion, FNP nationwide champion. The man is established in the wrestling industry, to say the least. However, our locker room is inspired, and it is time for the spectacle of Amazing Grapple's 1930. This is the conclusion of the 5th Derby, and we've got a huge show ready to go to end out this episode with the biggest event of the year. And we do have a pre-show bout featuring Duke Wellington and Woodrow Gunter, some heavyweight action, and we actually see Duke Wellington with a nice in-ring performance of 35. Quite the surprise there, as the solo Wellington brother is a part of a match rating that gets a 42, largely in part because Woodrow Gunter had an in-ring performance of 51. But now that Gunter is building some popularity in the Mid-South, we are really starting to see those ratings increase and see a little bit more of a payoff for him being the most expensive member on our roster. However, the actual show will get started with Hermenegildo Ramirez and Wayne Blankenship going one-on-one. Not a lot of story behind this, but just more pecking order clarity for the junior heavyweight division, and Hermenegildo Ramirez hasn't been seen in quite a while. So we got him here, and he delivers with an in-ring performance of 60, while Wayne Blankenship gets an in-ring performance of 31, and we get a total match rating of 49 to get the show off to a strong start. Moving into the next segment, Riker Zucker would make his way to the ring to announce a change in the scheduled match card. As we know, Elijah Mays has made it to the finals of the Derby and is set to compete with Friedrich Herzog for the championship tonight. However, Riker Zucker would make the statement that Barnabas Beef Wellington has in fact confirmed that Elijah Mays will not be eligible to compete for the heavyweight championship, given the odd nature of how Elijah Mays' last match concluded, and also acknowledging the odd circumstances that brought Elijah Mays into the tournament to begin with. Bronson Fraley has been chosen to replace Elijah in the final spot. In addition, Elijah Mays will be removed from the venue tonight. However, Elijah Mays would take exception to this notion and come to the ring himself, clearly furious and immediately intimidating Riker Zucker. As Riker Zucker began to try to backtrack and make the case that he was just the messenger, Elijah Mays would apply the guillotine choke to the broadcaster, leaving Zucker's motionless body in the ring. A security crew would then surround the ring area, where Elijah Mays would make his way to the back with no further conflict. So Elijah Mays getting screwed as he continued to defy the odds, making it to the final of the Derby. However, Bronson Fraley, who has got the Wellingtons in his back pocket, has seemed to be chosen to take the place of Elijah Mays, as Elijah Mays is in fact a junior heavyweight and cannot compete for the heavyweight championship, but also won the previous match with some funky circumstances. Overall segment rating of 37, and we are going to move on. And we get another really good match, and things are looking up for some new roster members. We got Sebastian Morales and Masked Hammer competing in some tag team action against Neil Allman and Turner Spittler. And Turner Spittler would actually come away with the victory here, picking up the pinfall over Sebastian Morales after a body slam. But really everyone performed really well. Masked Hammer at 50, Sebastian Morales at 62, Turner Spittler at 49, and Neil Allman at 61. And since Sebastian Morales is on a new contract and we got a second opportunity to give him a new gimmick, and we did change his gimmick, and it is a massive increase from his previous gimmick that was poor to now getting a rating of very good. However, Turner Spittler gets a rating of awful for his cowboy gimmick. But all in all, we get a segment rating of 55, and that will tie the greatest match in Wham history. So a really powerful tag team match. However, this really had no stipulation or no weight to it other than building some momentum for all the guys involved. And from that great tag team match, we move on into a not so great tag team match, and for the tag team championships at that, which is a little disappointing. However, it does feature the Wellington brothers, and that does make a lot of sense. But we would see Angus and Chuck coming away with the victory after blatantly cheating, just taking advantage of the numbers that they have at ringside. Bronson Fraley and Duke Wellington bending the rules, and ultimately it was just too much for Dean Grunge and Diego Berrigan to overcome. However, they do turn in some nice performances, as Diego Berrigan was at 35, Dean Grunge at 42, while Chuck was at 29 and Angus was at 18. So we just get a segment rating of 33, but the tag team championships are defended successfully. And in the next segment, we would see Emilio and Gabriela Suarez make their way to the ring, once again looking boastful, opposed to how we saw them last month. Once in the ring, Gabriela would take the microphone and begin to cut a promo, stating how they plan to go down in history as the siblings who took over the wrestling industry. Though before she could finish, Emilio would snatch the mic from her hands and obnoxiously claim his championship reign to be the greatest in history, and then go on to make an open challenge to anyone who thinks they can hang with him in the ring. Gabriela would immediately reprimand Emilio for his arrogance and obnoxious attitude, but it would be too late and his challenge would be answered. We'd get a segment rating of 38, and this rolls right into our championship match. And Albie Dewberry and Joel Cartwright would both come out to answer this open challenge that Emilio Suarez has presented. And Albie Dewberry and Joel Cartwright have been competing kind of neck and neck for quite a while, and this is kind of right on brand as they continue to try to one-up one another. And in the road agent notes, this match concludes as a draw, and we got a lot to unpack about exactly how this match ended. But basically, Albie Dewberry and Joel Cartwright would both score the pinfall on Emilio Suarez, and we'll get into that in just a moment. But we got the numbers of it all to break down as well. Albie Dewberry with a performance of 56, Emilio Suarez at 60, and Joel Cartwright all the way up at 64. Unfortunately, this match just got a rating of 42, but that is because the creative finish was a failure. and it did not work out in our favor, but Gabriela Suarez did some good work ringside, and Emilio Suarez of course has that hot new move. Now getting into the ending of the match, which got us a segment rating of 42, which is ironic. As the match was reaching its end, Emilio was looking to wrap things up with a top rope maneuver. However, on his way up, he would once again nearly strike his sister. This would cause a small altercation as Emilio began to climb the turnbuckle. During the exchange with Gabriela, Joel Cartwright and Albie Dewberry would send Emilio crashing back down to the mat. Gabriela would then retaliate and hit an enziguri to both Joel Cartwright and Albie Dewberry in the back of their heads, causing them both to fall. In their struggle to get up, each man would put a hand on Emilio Suarez, causing Kenny Lyles to make the 3 count, though he realized there would be no definitive winner by doing so. So Dewberry, Cartwright both technically get the pinfall on Emilio Suarez. However, in a championship match, you can't have 2 victors. So this match is ultimately deemed as a draw, which would in turn leave Emilio Suarez as champion, but we'll just have to see what happens on the next edition of the Amazing Grappling Spectacle to truly find out what happens with the fallout of this one. And now we've got the main event of the Spectacle of Amazing Grapples 1930, held in front of just 98 people because we made these ticket prices a premium. So we'll have to see the financial effect on that one. But the final of the Derby is Friedrich Herzog and Bronson Fraley. Friedrich Herzog, the leader of the Pride, and Bronson Fraley, the muscle and more or less the in-ring leader of the Wellington Dynasty. We see a good match between these two, segment rating of 50, but Friedrich Herzog would be the one to come out of here on top, retaining his championship and winning the Derby for the first time, opposed to Bronson Fraley picking it up for the 3rd time. This is the 5th defense for Friedrich Herzog for the heavyweight championship. He's got an in-ring performance of 52. Bronson Fraley had an in-ring performance of 42, but of course, this match didn't just end in any kind of vanilla fashion. As the match was winding down, the lights once again lost power, calling back to Bronson Fraley's last match. There was a moment where once again all visibility was lost. This time, an eerie carnival tune was playing over the speakers, nearly drowning out and making it impossible to hear the shrieks of the Wellingtons. As the lights returned, Bronson Fraley was down in the ring, and the Wellington brothers were nowhere to be seen. Friedrich Herzog was bewildered. However, he would quickly cover Bronson Fraley, securing the win before anything else could happen. Friedrich Herzog is clearly paranoid despite coming away with the victory following more unforeseen events. The champion and Derby victor would quickly gather his championship belt and make his leave from the ring with Fritz Hattendorf. However, Fritz Hattendorf was also absent from the ring area upon the lights returning. Herzog would show frustrations as this was not how he envisioned celebrating a Derby victory. So just a segment rating of 36 in this promo, but a really good match to end out the night, and overall, the show gets a rating of 47. So almost all of the matches delivered, to the exception of the tag team match with the Wellington brothers, but again, that is to be expected given their abilities or lack thereof. But we got a really good pre-show match, a good main event, and Neil Allman, Turner Spittler, Sebastian Morales, and Masked Hammer with the match of the night at a 55 rating. And I think that is good reason to praise Turner Spittler and Masked Hammer as well, and they both seem pleased. We'll see a major change with our ticket sales with the premium pricing versus the normal, because I think we would have had an increased attendance rate if we kept them normal anyway, and our ticket sales being at $15.68 is kind of right about a little bit higher than normal. So overall profit of $324, nothing bad by any means, but I don't think it made a huge difference, just kind of lessened our popularity gain, so maybe we don't do that again for at least a while. But we do see the popularity increase from 25 to 26, and that's a big one. And after the last show, the Spectacle of Amazing Grapples has had a rise in importance, and it's now rated as an above average event. So we'll take that one. More good things as we continue to progress. Certainly nothing I'm going to be angry about. And after a big night, that is where we're going to end it here. Thank you to all the real ones subscribed on Patreon. You guys are awesome and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you to everyone else on Patreon, and as for everyone else, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.